Guys, UFC 294, what an incredible turn of events. But something very important has happened here that we need to talk about and discuss. And it pertains to Kamaru Usman. Oh, pertains, how's that word? Kamaru Usman, guys, he has come out of the betting blocks and he is sitting at a 3-1 underdog. 2 fights ago, Kamaru Usman was the #1 pound for pound greatest fighter in the world, and 2 fights later, he is coming out as a 3-1 underdog. Guys, that just shows the savagery and how quickly this sport moves. And I am here to ask you today what we are going to discuss together, you and me, down here in the comments is that fair to Kamaru Usman? What a sport, guys. It's not like a team has lost a Super Bowl or a premiership and some of the old teammates have gone and now young up-and-comers have come in. It's literally the same guy back at his old team, and he has gone from the greatest undeniable fighter in the world to 3-1. 3-1, right? Imagine, right? After this Volkanovsk versus Islam Makhachev fight, Volkanovsk comes out as a 3-1 underdog in 2 fights' time. Imagine John Jones in 2 fights' time coming out as a 3-1 underdog. That is what is happening here. This sport is rough, guys. But is it fair or is it not? Okay, and when you start to look at this fight deeply, not just on paper, because when you look at it on paper, it's completely unreasonable, these odds. But when you actually start to break it down and look at it deeply, Kamaru Usman is in a lot of trouble, which is wild to say. Again, I mean, someone who has watched this sport for so long, Usman is considered as one of the greatest, maybe the second greatest. Some people think he's the greatest. And it's interesting because if GSP came back today, I wonder where he would stack up on the odds. It's so crazy, you know, the way that you go out as a fighter sort of sets the tone for the rest of your career. Look at Henry Cejudo and the way he came back and what's happening to him now. Now he might have to fight Merab Dvalishvili and just another contender, and he went from a champ GOAT. I wonder what would happen if Khabib came back today. Interesting thoughts to be had there. Anyway, guys, let's look at the breakdown of this fight in particular. Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. Chimaev, right, guys? He's 31 years old, which in my eyes is the peak age for an MMA athlete. And he is essentially sitting on home soil. Like, I know that it's not actually his home country, but the atmosphere that the people there are going to create for him will make it feel like he is on home soil. Plus, Chimaev has fought here many times before. He sort of created and carved his name out on Fight Island. And then you look at Kamaru Usman. He's 36 years old. Not that much older, but in this sport, it makes a massive difference. Again, Kamaru Usman is only 15-2 in the UFC. Kamaru Usman is a phenomenal striker who held his own with the current world champion, Leon Edwards, who is also a phenomenal striker. Now, look, he did lose on the feet once, but that was after 23 minutes of what was an absolute domination. Joe Rogan was literally saying Leon Edwards is in this just to not lose. Look at the striking of Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev is seen as a iffy striker. He was in an absolute war with Gilbert Burns. Now, being in a war with Gilbert Burns doesn't make you an iffy striker, but when we're looking at this on paper, you can either be essentially kicking Leon Edwards' ass for 23 minutes in a striking heavy match, or you can be sort of taking it war for war with Gilbert Burns. Who do you think is going to be the better striker? Plus, Usman has developed a jab and a stand-up game that has been renowned and is sort of what got him to that #1 pound for pound level, right? It was his striking. We always knew he was a great wrestler, but as he developed his striking, that's what sort of elevated him to that pound for pound level. I don't think Chimaev's striking is quite at that level. So I'm going to say Chimaev, iffy striker, Usman, phenomenal striker. When we look at the wrestling, they're both said to be phenomenal wrestlers. But here is the really interesting thing and where it starts to sort of break down, right? Usman is said to be a phenomenal wrestler, and I do believe that in his younger days, say from 18 to 28, Usman was a phenomenal wrestler. But Usman has had hip problems and knee problems that have sort of plagued him throughout the later stages of his career. And I do believe that is why he started to develop such a heavy striking game. I do not think Kamaru Usman is a phenomenal wrestler anymore. Look at the first Masvidal fight, right? Now, Masvidal came in on short notice, and Kamaru Usman couldn't really get him down or keep him on the mat or control him on the mat. If you remember that fight, and you might have a hard time remembering that fight because Kamaru Usman put us all to sleep. All he was doing was pushing Masvidal up against the cage and foot stomping him. He couldn't get him down and ground and pound him, savagely destroying him. A good Dagestani wrestler could do. That is amazing wrestling. And Kamaru Usman didn't have that against a short notice stand-up striking Masvidal. In the Leon Edwards 3 fight, Usman couldn't get him down to save his life. Now, Chimaev is easily the best wrestler going around in the UFC right now. That was hyperbolic, wasn't it? That was too far. Chimaev is an amazing wrestler, one of the best wrestlers going around in the UFC right now. And again, Chimaev is at his peak age, 31 years old. Chimaev has essentially had a year off to just train. For the last 6 months, Khamzat Chimaev thinks he's been fighting strikers, so he's been lifting his striking game. So now you've got a very tall, lanky bloke who was a decent enough striker to hold it with Gilbert Burns, who has had 6 months to a year to increase that level of striking, who already has a very, very good wrestling game, one that would certainly be good enough to keep up with Kamaru Usman. And then you start to look at this betting line a little bit more closely. Guys, we're not going to come out and say that Kamaru Usman is an easy night at the office for anybody. But when you do look at the latter half of Usman's career as a whole and how his wrestling was going against Masvidal, Edwards, how Colby Covington pushed him to the line, again, an older guy. I know Colby is, again, phenomenal, but an older guy. When you look at all of these factors, it really does start to make sense why 3-1 is a fair line for Kamaru Usman, why he deserves to be the underdog here. And I do think that at UFC 294, this is Chimaev's fight to lose. I really do believe that. Kamaru Usman is in for a huge uphill battle. If he is going to make a resurgence in his career at 36, it is going to be a fantastic effort. And I don't know if Kamaru Usman has it in him. I really don't. I wish him the best. I would love to see Kamaru Usman shock the world and win. I'm going to be backing Usman in this fight. My heart is going to be going for Usman, but my brain is going to say Chimaev is going to win via decision. That is how I think that this fight is going to go down. Guys, let me know down in the comments. Do you think the betting line is outrageous? Do you see a path to victory for Usman? Are you going to be putting your money on that tasty underdog? I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments. If you've been enjoying the channel, also consider clicking that subscribe button just before you click off to your next video. Just click subscribe right there, and I'll see you all in the next one.